Hey guys, this is Brandon, host of For the Fowlers. Before we dive into the new episode, I'm excited to announce our first giveaway courtesy of this episode's guest, Grayson Katka of Field and Range Solutions. Field and Range Solutions is a full-service gunsmithing operation based at Kittle's Outdoor in Colusa, California. Grayson and his team handle all types of Cerakote and gunsmithing work with great care and precision. Be sure to check them out on Instagram at Field and Range Solutions. Here's how to enter the giveaway. First, follow us on Instagram at For the Fowlers. Second, like our post pinned at the top of our Instagram detailing this giveaway. And finally, tag at least 2 of your hunting buddies in the comments. Once you complete these steps, you'll be entered to win a $100 gift certificate to Field and Range Solutions, redeemable for any of their services. Shortly after we reach 500 followers, we will randomly select a winner from the comments. Thank you again to Grayson, and thank you all, the listeners, for your incredible support of For the Fowlers. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of For the Fowlers. I'm Brandon. I'm going to be doing this one by myself, but we're bringing on a good guest here shortly. Well, guys, here it is, middle of November, and we're in the middle of a pretty crazy November storm right now. This storm's been great, kind of stirring up the birds, and a lot of folks are starting to have some success out there this week, so it's been great seeing some of those pictures out on Instagram. I've been able to get out a couple times myself this past week or so, and it's been good to finally be knocking down some birds. I was going to a couple different refuges, and the kind of report from the Sacramento Valley is we're starting to see some birds out there. We're seeing some widgeon, some pintail, obviously the shovelers, but I think some guys are getting pretty desperate out on the refuge, because talking to a couple of the check station staff, we're getting a lot of divers checked in there. But yeah, the fields are starting to flood up around the valley, so we'll start to see more and more big ducks out there. But yeah, so hopefully everyone's having a good season so far. And, without further ado, let's bring on our guest. So coming to you live from Field and Range Solutions here in the back of Kittle's Outdoor in Colusa, California. And this week's guest is the owner of Field and Range Solutions, none other than gunsmith Grayson Katka. Grayson, welcome to For the Fowlers, man.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I know we've been chatting a little bit this season. You've done some work for me already, which I really appreciate. You're obviously a master of your craft, but yeah, I'd love to have you on here to kind of talk a little bit about how you got into, the practice of being a gunsmith. And, but before we jump into all that technical stuff, let's hear a little bit about your background. I know your story, but for the listeners here, maybe tell us a little bit about, where you're from, where you grew up, how you got into hunting, and ultimately how you ended up here as a gunsmith.
Yeah, man. I started off with an interesting start with my grandfather being a gunsmith. Kind of had that in the blood from the get-go. Spent some time around him and spent some time around some other kind of influential family members growing up who were just really, really into guns in a wild way. My dad was a total outdoorsman, fishing, hunting, everything else. Didn't hunt all that much, but was just kind of a gun guy. And then I had a grandpa married into the family who was super, super into shooting guns, the tactical stuff, and he got me really into that. Shot some competition pistol a little bit when I was younger, IDPA, and he just really instilled the love of firearms and just the technology of firearms in me. That was all up in Chico. Spent all my youth in Chico, and then got into hunting when I was about 18, give or take. I hunted upland some when I was younger and hunted around a little bit when I was a little bit younger than that, but nothing major. And then ended up going to gunsmithing school just after tinkering for however many years. I was like, you know what, I better get into this more deeply. I had a passion for it. So went to gunsmithing school after working in the retail industry, selling outdoor equipment, selling firearms, selling accessories and whatnot for years and years at that point. Continued to work in the outdoors industry up in Susanville at Lassen College, doing the gunsmithing school, and then graduated and had a few different job opportunities, some pretty cool stuff, and ultimately decided to come on down here to Kittle's and kind of start my own thing. And the rest is history.
I wanted to ask you about that program up in, I'm sorry, you said Susanville, right?
That's right, yeah.
I think when I originally heard the story, it was a pretty small program, but, kind of one guy running it up there. How's the program going these days? Any you stayed in touch at all? Or?
Super, yeah. So actually, me and my employee, who I'd love to talk about, his name's Dalton. He's a more recent graduate of Lassen as well. He's working for me here, apprenticing and doing a great job in the shop. But yeah, man, the college is in a pretty tough spot right now. They're in the process of actually doing away with it, and it's the oldest college of gunsmithing in the country, and they're going through some strife. So we've been writing letters and doing what we can to show support for that.
Yeah, let us know and let the listeners know, if there's anything that we can do to, kind of keep that interest up and see if we can't save that program, because we were talking about it a little bit off air here. We need more gunsmiths out there, right?
It's 100%, man.
We all know that there are plenty of opportunities, especially with some of big box stores, if you will, that they offer, firearm service and cleaning and repair and stuff like that. But I think any of us that have gone to those, not to name any of them, but sometimes it's just, you want to go see someone who's a master of their craft.
100%. And that old school approach of just walk in and talk to me, right? Yeah. You can just come show me what's going on. I'll drop what I'm doing and give you a couple minutes and just try and figure it out with you. A lot of times that's all it takes. And, having that one-on-one interaction, it's very much a trust-based industry, right? People, it's like a doctor or something, right? You wouldn't just trust anybody you've never seen before. So
exactly. So like I said, we're in the back here at Kittle's, and it's funny, when I first met you, I said I've been coming in here for years and never knew that this little gunsmith area even existed. Yeah. And so and you might have mentioned, but how long have you been operating out of here?
We've been doing it. This will be our third duck season.
That's
so
awesome.
Just about 3 years. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about what a day in the life looks like back here? You mentioned, obviously, it's early duck season here. We're in middle of November or early November. What's a day in the shop look like, maybe during duck season? Maybe kind of three parts: during duck season, but also kind of as people are, hey, it's August, I want to bring my gun into Grayson, or, for instance, for me, I'm like, what, it's February, I'm going to drop it off. I'll get it from you in August. So what's a day in the life look like here?
Yeah. We start off, we kind of mirror the gunroom hours here at Kittle's, which is 9 to 5:30, Monday through Friday. Saturdays, Kittle's gunroom is open 9 to 5:30 as well, but it's kind of a swing day for us. Most of the time we're here in the morning, but might take off in the afternoon to go hunt or something. Yeah, we show up at 9 and we get after it from point A to point B. There's just so many different people coming and going during duck season. It's been a real blessing having Dalton around to kind of pick up a lot of the slack, stay on task. But lots of people calling, lots of people needing parts, lots of people stuff breaking, lots of things like stuck choke tubes, lots of things like broken off sights. These are, ailments that are typically pretty simply remedied, but you gotta just pick up the phone and talk to a lot of people and multitask a lot. And duck season in Colusa, California is pretty wild.
No, for sure. And I don't obviously love promoting your business, but I don't want to overwhelm you. But obviously
please do.
There's a lot of great things that you are able to do, kind of like day of. Like I've even, I had an issue last season. I came in, took care. I think I had that stovepiping issue. We took care of one little spring, and I was out the door within 20 minutes or so. So that's not always the case, but obviously, swing by, come see Grayson if you're up here in the Sac Valley, and he'll take care of you for sure.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, we'll always do our best for you.
Yeah. So obviously I mentioned a couple of issues that I've had, but what are some of the most common repairs or issues that you see during the season, and maybe what do you see the most of?
Yeah. Well, firearms operate in kind of a sequence. There's the firing sequence, the extraction sequence, the ejecting sequence, and then the feeding sequence, which we're getting all technical on people here. But basically, there's different systems in the gun. I mean, most often, if we're having a cycling problem, which is real common, somebody just comes in and they just say, hey, my gun's not cycling. That's a pretty broad statement, right? It could be any one of those systems not working right. It could not be firing, couldn't be extracting. Could be that it's not ejecting or not actually feeding. So something related to that is very frequently the case. Range of reasons why. A lot of times, it cracks me up, but a lot of times the gun's just flat wore out, man. You just shot the daylights out of it, which is a good reason to have your gun not work. But dropping it by after, 10 years of hammering on it, a little rebuild, and typically we can get it going again.
Yeah, I was to say, how many folks do you see come through that, are pretty routine? There's some folks that, keep the maintenance up on their car, and then there's some folks that don't take their car in until there's smoke coming out of the engine or whatnot. So is there a balance, especially I feel like if people are coming to see you, like at a gunsmith place, and we invest a lot of money in our firearms too. I was looking at what's down in your room. Like, you have some pretty high dollar firearms down there and different shotguns. Are folks do they stay up on it? Most of your customers?
Yeah, people range all over the place, right? Some guys, a gun is a tool, and that's the way that they treat it, right? If the hammer's still hitting nails, what are we thinking about fixing the hammer for, right? The if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach, as I like to call it. And there's a lot of those guys, and when we get their guns in, it's typically a several $100 thing. We're looking at rust, we're looking at springs, potentially broken parts, let alone the wear items, the things that are just generally supposed to be replaced rather. But yeah, we have tons and tons and tons of clients that come in once a year, every year, drop all of their guns off, spend a minimal amount because they're regularly maintained, and we maintain their guns professionally, and it shows. It's really easy to clean because they've been cleaned. If the longer you wait, the harder it is.
That's awesome. I know that, your expertise, it's across all different types of firearms, and I'm sure up here you get a lot of different, hunting shotguns, waterfowl, upland, different things like that.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite guns to work on, and maybe the ones that you dread? You see it come in, you're like, oh, this one's going to be a pain in the ass.
I'm going to freaking piss some people off with this one, man. I really enjoy working on anything well made, anything from the last. I don't know. There's models from all over the spectrum, but Berettas, Benellis are easy. A lot of the Brownings are pretty easy. Most of the modern stuff is pretty simple to work on, but there's a handful of things in certain modern gun designs. And like I said, I don't want to piss somebody off with this, but like specifically the SX3, the SX4, the Browning Maxis, the Beretta 390, certain 3901s, they have a steel recoil tube in the back, and that steel recoil tube is one of those, it's inside the stock typically. That area inside the stock, guys, it's out of sight, out of mind, and it gets full of water, it gets full of gunk, and that turns into just a little microbiome full of rust. And that's always a pain.
So I'm going to give a little shout out to my buddy Caton, who is normally on For the Fowlers with me. And when I called you about a month ago, I was asking about, hey, Grayson, help me figure out, the Beretta A400, the Benelli Super Black Eagle. And we were kind of talking about the difference and what we wanted there, or what he wanted. And the reason why is because he is running, I think, the SX3 or the SX4, right?
Totally.
So, hey, Caton, when you listen to this, hey, Grayson said, ditch it and get a Beretta or Benelli.
They're a workhorse, man.
They are, for sure.
They're all so good, but just the way that the back end on those is set up, especially too, that you combine the fact that they're just the way the gas system works, you just get a lot of gas in those systems, and maintained, they're all good, but for the amount of time guys go between maintaining, typically those models I listed.
For sure.
Yeah.
You talked about just well-built, shotguns, well-built equipment and stuff like that. Are newer shotguns still as well? Because we always hear hey, my great grandpa's gun, has stood up the test of time, right?
Sure.
But what are your thoughts on newer shotguns versus, some of those classics, as from your perspective, as far as working on them, intricacies of the technology, stuff like that? What are your thoughts when it comes to, working on those firearms?
That's a great question. It's kind of nuanced, I think. I think the newer shotguns are designed to be simpler. So a Benelli, I can probably rip apart a Benelli in 20 seconds on the bench, right? It's super easy. Beretta, it's not much longer than that. All these guns, even some of the Brownings and the Winchesters that I was just bitching about, they're simple too. But the inclusion of a lot of polymer, the inclusion of a lot of, different intentional wear items on these guns, it just creates things that just have to be replaced. I think back in the day, I'll, just to use as an example, the Browning A5, the old humpback steel frame A5, right? You open one of those up on the inside and there's like 20 screws. There's like weird V springs. If you haven't ever looked inside one, it would be weird looking, and those things are extremely robust. They're heavy as a boat anchor, but they're really, really, really tough. And they're really easy to work on because of that. But they're just different. I honestly, I can't help but think about, if you think about how many shells we shoot nowadays, I don't know if it's more or less than it used to be, but I think about these, like snow goose spreads, right? And you can shoot, 20 snows in the late season, right? And these shells are so powerful now, right? Super high velocity, super heavy payload, which velocity isn't necessarily your friend, but all these things, right? So that we combine, the strength of the shell and how light, some of these guns are, with the volume that we're shooting. We're just smashing guns to pieces, right? Like it's really amazing to me. Not only do we have all these super high powerful shells that we're shooting nowadays, and the quantity of it, you think about these, like for instance, Grandpa's old A5 or whatever, he was shooting like 1,200 feet per second, 2 3/4 inch lead fives, right? It's a very different shell than, a 3-inch ounce and 3/8 steel loader, God forbid 3.5s, whatever. So,
and I'm looking at, you have a box of Kent fast deals up here, that I had a question about these because, some of our listeners might be, maybe get new into waterfowl hunting. They got a shotgun right off the rack at their local spot. And, I shoot Kent fast deals through my Benelli. They seem to work great, pattern real well. Everything's perfect on them. 1,300 feet per second, but I'm running a new choke this season, and the shell that I'm actually thinking about switching to, it's like 1,450. So feet per second. It's like, okay, I'm thinking about impact on the game, that I'm trying to harvest, but what am I doing to my shotgun? And I never really think of that as like, okay, the velocity, is what kind of impact is that having to my shotgun, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a great conversation. I'm a student of Jimmy Muller. Muller choke tubes are absolutely phenomenal, and I won't shill his products here, but if you've never heard him speak, he's been on a bunch of podcasts. We hope to have him on. I'd love to chit chat with him for hours on end one day, but he has a saying. It's that speed doesn't kill birds, pellets kill birds. What that means is there's only so much velocity that you need out of your shell before you start negatively impacting what your patterns are doing. More BBs, more pellets, meaning a heavier charge weight. That could mean going from 1 1/8 or 1 1/4 up to 1 3/8 shell and dropping the velocity down a ton. You're going to have so many more BBs downrange. You're going to have such a better pattern because the velocities and the pressures are lower. Downrange performance is going to be superb. Really, 1,250 or a 1,300 feet per second shell is really great for all shot materials and all choke tubes. About 1,300 feet per second cap is great. 1,400, you start seeing some negative effects on the pattern, and Jimmy's talked about this ad nauseum. And there's actually another really great YouTube series, if people are listening and haven't heard it, the Surviving Duck Season series. He has some really cool episodes on shot stringing. He rented that big old expensive camera. So yeah, man, it's really lovely seeing what shells are coming out now. This box of Kent we have in front of us it's the Fast Steel 2.0. It's a 12 gauge 3-inch shell. These are 3s happen to be, but it's 1 3/8 at 1,300 feet per second. I have not patterned these in a gun yet, but I guarantee the patterns through most people's guns on average would be just absolutely superb.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to stick with technology a little bit, and I don't know if we're getting away from the gunsmith part and getting more into like, hey, that'd be a question for like the firearm rep. But I'm curious with all like this technology that's coming out. Like I said, I'm a Benelli guy through and through. Whether it's my SB3 or you were just messing with my Franke downstairs. So I'm a loyal Benelli guy, but I'm always curious, like some of this like technology that's out there, specifically with them, like, the advanced impact, the AI, the barrel, and, their coding and stuff like that. Like, how much of a difference does that kind of stuff make? Like, how much of it, that whole example of the arrow or the Indian, does that stuff really make, and we're talking about shells here, we're talking, does it make that big of a difference? Because, like, at the end of the day, I mean, a regular Super Black Eagle off the shelf is like 2,000 to 2,200. Now you start adding this stuff up, you're upwards of $3,000.
Totally, yeah.
So,
yeah, in my opinion, there's a handful of things that really, really matter.
Yeah.
The gun definitely matters. The gun geometry, the way the barrel is, the chamber dimensions, the forcing cone, the actual nominal bore diameter, which varies all over the board from manufacturer to manufacturer, the choke tube itself, the gun matters for sure as far as the way it patterns. The technology is interesting to bring up. I don't want to stifle or dissuade anybody from buying anything, but or dissuade any companies from inventing new stuff, right? I want them to push the envelope.
Let me ask it a different way, because obviously it seems like most of the things we see new camo patterns coming out here, different, recoil technology to make it a more comfortable shot. Is the technology, like the overall build of the gun, when we look at like trigger assembly, the things that like kind of you would mess with, does that stuff change much? Like, with these newer guns coming out, or is it kind of like the same setup, semi-auto.
Are we making improvements? Yeah. Is it meaningful? Well, back to what I was saying. Like the AI barrel, for instance, it's the marketing is saying like what 40% more penetration or 60% additional penetration at any given yardage. As soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. I saw a video recently. A guy, he got his hands on one of those AI guns and put it in ballistic gelatin, and yeah, no difference. It's the same. There are certain things that do matter, and these newer guns, they do have a lot of things in them that really do matter. Pick up my Super Black Eagle 1 downstairs and put a 3.5-inch shell through it, and then pick up my Super Black Eagle 2 and do the same thing, and then pick up a Super Black Eagle 3 and do the same thing. It's going to hit you every time, but the difference between the 3 and that 1 is dramatic. The 3 has dramatically less recoil. Patterning, I think the AI barrel probably has something to do with one continuous giant forcing cone all the way to the end of the gun. I haven't seen one yet, but could that positively affect patterns? Sure, not in the way that they're describing.
Yeah,
but
and I don't want to call it, I mean, it's marketing, right? At the end of the day, they're looking to sell more. That's their business. But I guess for me, like when I think about like, okay, I look at like my Super Black Eagle, that's probably the last shotgun I'll ever need to buy. I love that thing. But, if I'm looking at like, if Benelli were to come out and say like, hey, we have better, internal stuff like with springs and actions and cycling and different, like those are the things that I'm more interested in, not a new camo pattern, not a, a tighter barrel, like the things that I come in and see you about, where if like I'm out in the field and shells aren't cycling properly, right?
Sure.
Like, I know that that's an issue versus, my spread wasn't as tight through this bear. You know what I mean? Like, unless we're looking at a patterning board, I'm not going to know. Or if I have one of those shot cams on the end of my gun, I'm not going to know the difference. So, yeah, I'm always curious about that. It's kind of one of those examples. I always think like, and we're both sitting here with our beards, but like, Gillette, right? Gillette is like the market leader when it comes to razors, but still every year there's a new razor coming out. It's like, how many times are you going to reinvent the razor?
Yeah.
So I keep waiting for the Super Black Eagle 4. And I was listening to another podcast and they had the Benelli rep on, and I know there's some exciting stuff coming. So who knows? Maybe they'll get me. I'm a Benelli guy. So, well, right on, man. So I want to talk a little maintenance 101, and a lot of this stuff is obviously we want people to come in here, see you, you're the expert, but at the same time, there's things that we can do kind of at home, out in the field that will keep our gun with us more longer. So that way, we take it to you end of season, you do the tune up, stuff like that. But How about some preventative care that, some of us hunters can do, before, during, and after the season?
Yeah, it depends on kind of your situation. If you end up back at home base, some guys hunt at a club where they don't have a ton of resources necessarily with them. Some guys hunt at a club where they got all the resources. Some guys hunt the refuge where they have nothing at the refuge. Before season, I mean, if you're not going to come see a gunsmith and have the gun, fully done up, basic cleaning, fully tear the gun down. Don't be scared. If you lose something, you lose something. But most of these guns are simple enough now where you can keep track of everything pretty well. Turn the gun.
And you guys do that here too, right? You guys will do a full extensive cleaning, all that stuff, right?
Totally. Awesome. Full services are a normal thing. Yeah, fully tearing the gun down, hot water and simple green and toothbrush and just getting after it, getting all that gunk out of there, really rinsing it off really, really well, blowing it out with some air or air drying it good, and then lubricating it lightly in the critical areas. That's all it takes for before season. If you're not going to tear it down during season, just make sure the gun's lubricated enough, not overdoing it. Like we said, we were talking about it down there. Just anywhere where there's metal on metal, inside the bolt, anywhere where your magazine or plunger ride, making sure your magazine inside the magazine is not getting too awful rusty with that spring. And then if it rains heavy, I know it sucks when you get home and you're just tired. Let the gun air out, man. Lightly lubricate it. Don't let it sit wet. That'll result in some crappy stuff, especially during season. Making sure your choke tubes, staying greased. Graphite or copper-based anti-seize is what we use. And then after season, you just rode it hard. Make sure you don't put it away wet. Just making sure you do the same stuff.
Nice. And does that change, like, for instance, I feel like we're talking a lot about semi-autos, but obviously there's a group of folks out there that still love, the trusty old pump. Is it a little less maintenance, obviously less parts, stuff like that, or still kind of the same thing? Make sure obviously if it rains, let it dry out. If you submerge it, let it dry out, all that kind of stuff. But, and any main differences between a semi-auto and a pump when it comes to that quick maintenance?
Pumps are easy, man. Pumps are beloved for a reason. Pop that mag cap off, pull the barrel off, pull the bolt out, drop the trigger group. You got it all, man. There's no gas to think about. There's no real big giant springs. Same concepts, just making sure it's clean and lubricated, but even less of a reason with pump guns not to miss maintenance. You gotta.
So speaking of maintenance, and especially out in the field, like what do you recommend that like we carry in our blind bag here? I mean, I carry basically like a Leatherman, and that's kind of about it. But for the most part, what are some things you recommend that we kind of keep in our blind bag? Oil, stuff like that. What do you recommend? I
really started carrying around a handful of things about 5 years ago that have really changed the game. A little oil. A little tiny bottle of oil. We carry the CLP, the break-free products, as well as Slip 2000 products. But just a little tiny bottle of oil. It can go a long way. I started carrying around a Leatherman as well. I'm just making sure that you've got anything. I mean, it could be a freaking ballpoint pen, whatever, to punch your trigger group pin out to clear out if you fall in the some kind of seeds or something, some kind of flowery seed gets in your gun. That happens all the time. One of the worst things is like some of these, buffered heavy shells, right? They have a kind of a flak style buffer. When those things, go off, sometimes you end up with all those little seeds everywhere in your gun, and that can be hell. So making sure you have a way to get those out. And then here's the pocket pick. Here's the secret sauce. Carry around a little canister of keyboard compressed air. A little bit of tiny compressed air with a little nozzle. You can blow out a lot of stuff from your trigger group without having to pull anything apart. I carry around 10 Q-tips, handful of toothpicks, whatever, mostly actually for other people's guns. But yeah, a little bit of compressed air and some lubrication will get you a freaking long way.
No, that's great to hear, because obviously I was asking you downstairs. I'm like, take it apart, use my toothbrush, all that, and ask like, hey, am I doing any damage by using an air compressor? Like, no, that's your best friend right there. So
totally,
same thing. That's awesome. I want to just kind of, off that same note, some quick field fixes that we should all know. A couple examples here. Maybe, you drop your gun, get a little mud in the barrel, or you submerge your gun during a hunt. Like, how big of a deal is that? Can you finish your hunt, or is it like, hey, no, gun's done for the day? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. Number one thing, if you drop your gun in the water, is you gotta pull it all the way apart. There's no getting around that. If you're doing it in the blind or the boat or at the launch ramp or in the truck, however you gotta do it, party on if you got enough time to tear it all the way down and do a full inspection and get back to it, and by all means. But there's a few things you got to do.
And what should we be looking for? I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
Why is that?
So this is super exciting stuff. Well, it's duck season. We're talking about guns and gear, and that stuff's super nerdy and fun. But bottom line is safety, man.
Okay.
And every single time I go out, I'm making sure that my barrel is not bulged. I'm making sure my shells are dry. I'm making sure that, all the way down to my muzzle being pointed in the safe direction, all the hunter safety basics, right? So we just can't forget that. It's really easy to, in a scramble, I drew a number 1 resi and I drop my gun in the water and get pissed. Safety's got to come first, man. And it's really easy to have something bad happen. Case in point, I should have brought a couple up here. I got a collection of exploded barrels downstairs.
I'll check that out before I leave. I was just going to bring that up.
Definitely take a couple pictures for socials or whatever. But yeah, guys will, get what's called a squib round sometimes, and that can cause a bulge. But dropping your gun in the water is an even faster way to do this. You pull the trigger, you've got some kind of bore obstruction. If you don't explode your action from being extremely overgassed, what'll typically happen is you'll pull so much pressure inside the barrel that you'll push giant bulge out into your barrel, and that'll cause an extremely weak spot in that area. And if you continue shooting, who knows what could happen? God forbid you get another malfunction someday, and then you could really hurt yourself or somebody around you in short order. So if you drop your gun in the water in the action, water in the barrel, mud, even worse, all of that can lead to extremely unsafe chamber pressures, extremely unsafe, barrel conditions. And seriously, the danger is high. So if you drop your gun in the water, first things first, unload the gun, completely unload the gun. Second thing, take your gun apart to whatever you feel is safe. If you don't feel safe, give me a call here at the shop. If you're anywhere close to here, I'll either walk you through it, or I'll if you can drop it by, I'll tear it down for you quick and just get you back in the fight. But you got to make sure your barrel's completely clear and dry. You got to make sure your gas system's completely clear and dry. We can't have any water anywhere in the trigger group or in the bolt or anything like that. We just don't want that water getting back into the chamber or anywhere where it can cause additional problems. If you can get it all the way apart and you can verify everything is completely dry, completely free of obstruction, and you've got shells that are still good, there's always a bit of a chance, after you do that, if you haven't had it professionally inspected. So take that chance at your own risk, but especially if you can get it all the way dry, free of obstruction, you should be pretty good to go shape.
So I just want to mention, mention safety and all that stuff. And especially if you're coming here, after a hunt, maybe the hunt didn't go the right way, your gun's malfunctioning, you dropped it, whatever, you're going to come see Grayson on your way home. Make sure, do us all a favor, make sure that gun's unloaded before you bring it into the shop too. Just a call out there, because I know I've heard stories in the past where, they bring it in, first thing you do, check it, and you're like, live rounds in here. So yeah, just a little safety shot out there.
Definitely make sure we're honestly, sometimes I have actually stopped at a guy's house in Sutter today. He called me today. I was out and about actually, so it worked out, but he was like, hey man, I got a 410, there's a shell stuck in it, can I bring that into you? I said, where's it stuck? He's like, in the chamber. I said, can you shoot the round out of the chamber? And he's like, nope. And I was like, okay, well, I'm out and about. I'll stop by. And I actually cleared the gun for him, and he's going to bring that in and drop it off. But it's one of those things. If you can't get the gun safe, call me, and we'll work out a strategy in order to make sure everybody stays safe.
Perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about some of this customization of our shotguns and firearms, and specifically some of the great things that you guys are doing here at your shop. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the modifications or upgrades that you're seeing out there for duck guns these days, specifically around aftermarket parts. And I know we talked a little bit about the technology, but a couple of the examples I put on here, and you've seen these trigger shoes, different bolt handles, stuff like that. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about those parts and how that applies to your world.
Yeah, the core gun is going to be the most important part, and the way the gun cycles, and the way it patterns and all that. But there are a lot of great upgrades, and there's a lot of things that we as hunters interact with on the gun, right? Charging the bolt, releasing the bolt, loading shells in, right? We did a modification on your Franke just a second ago, right? To make the shells way easier to load. You brought it in, it was like, dude, you got to be Hercules to put a freaking shell in this mag. Yeah. And so we softened that up a ton, right? Makes the gun just more pleasurable to operate and simpler and easier. Sometimes if you got kids too, or women who aren't as used to, anybody not used to running a gun, right? You know, bigger charging handles, bigger releases, etc. are huge. Biggest mods are going to be, you know, choke tubes. That's just an easy one. We talked about Muller, but Briley choke tubes are excellent. Indian Creek, Jebs, Kicks, Carlson's. Not the biggest fan of Pattern Master myself, but yeah, whatever you can get into. The camo, the Cerakote. Cerakote is just a freaking wonderful choice for a duck gun. Super, super tough, super durable. We can customize it. So if you want your logo, you want a camo pattern, you want whatever, we can do all that. Cerakote's also just a great protectant of the firearm.
So that's what I was going to say, because I'm familiar with Cerakote, and maybe some of our listeners are not. But obviously, you know, it's more than just the look. It obviously, like you just mentioned, that protectant, right? It's like that ceramic seal. Yeah. Just especially for some of us that, you know, might be a little hard on them, like, you know, we're out in the refuge or whatnot, or maybe hunting down Delta, the Bay, whatever it might be. So, and you guys are offering that here at the shop, correct?
All in-house. Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, you know, we were talking a little bit earlier about some of the different, and might be around the same, you know, the camo and dipping and all that, but some of the different things that you offer here, you know, I don't want to call it painting the gun, but, you know, the different finishes that you're offering here.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that and what that process looks like, and, you know, maybe, you know, how long that takes to get done and certain things.
Yeah, normal lead times right at this point right now, we're getting deeper into season. We're at 2 to 4 weeks, 3 to 5 weeks, depending on kind of exactly what we're looking at for turnaround. So still well within season. Yeah, some bluing and parkerizing and wood refinishing and all that. One modification that we didn't talk about, I see it's the next point on the thing here, but it's fitting the shotgun.
I know. So, and I wanted to, because we were talking a little bit about, hey, I've listened to previous episodes of some other podcasts that you've been on, and I put on my notes here, properly fitting, because of your example about when you hop into a car, the first thing you do is adjust the seat, right? And that's for you. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about fitting, because I know we were talking a little bit about, for me, downstairs, but yeah, let's talk about fitting and how you offer that here and how important that is.
Totally. So we've talked about pattern a little bit, and that ties in really, really tightly with gun fitting. So how the gun patterns is going to be basically, if we draw a circle around the pattern, how even and how consistent and how full is that circle, right? We don't want big holes and patches in that circle. So we talk about shells, we talk about, you know, gun geometry, we talk about choke tubes as far as how good the pattern is. Well, anytime we start talking about, you know, adjusting the gun to fit you, we can talk about moving that pattern as well. So if the gun shoots high or the gun shoots low, when we shoot it on a patterning board, we can adjust the high and the low, and we can adjust the left and the right to an extent. So that's the first thing, is moving that pattern on a patterning board to ensure that it's shooting exactly where we want it to shoot. When we point the gun, it hits where we aim it, but also, we were talking about you. You're a pretty big dude, right? Broad shoulders, kind of tall dude. That's a very different fit than for my girlfriend, who's, you know, 5'5" and thin as a rail, right? So the fitting side of stuff is so underappreciated in the average duck hunting and the average duck hunter's mind. I don't think it's really fully understood, just because the culture of duck hunting, right? Like, I was telling you this, right? The way we approach deer rifles is, you know, you pick out a cartridge. Like, I'm going to shoot a 30-06 or 307 PRC or 6.5 PRC, whatever, right? Whatever cartridge is in vogue, and then you're going to pick out the exact perfect round, and we're going to pick out the perfect scope on all the mounts and the stock and the trigger and the action and barrel. And we build custom rifles here too, so we have this conversation all the time, and we go through all of this, and then you go out to the range and you spend all this time and money reloading, and that's all normal in the rifle world. In the shotgun world, however, you just, whatever shotgun, whatever shells, go see what happens. Yep. There's no prep work. So the fitting of the shotgun is the prep work in the hunting world. It's step one when you buy a gun. Is there anything wrong with buying a gun and just going and trying to break a few clays or hit a couple birds? Maybe not, but there's an ethical quandary that comes with that, not being as ethical on the birds as you could be, but also you're not just being as consistent as you could possibly be. And that's a whole bag of worms, but
it's interesting because just in the gun room here this evening, I was watching a couple customers, and we all go in, we go to the counter, we shoulder the gun, all this stuff. Oh, perfect, great. I'll take that and give me a case of shells, and we're after our waiting period, we're out at the blind with that gun, right? But to your point, I'd be curious to know how many folks actually pattern their guns, how many folks actually get fitted for it. It's funny. I think to your point, going back to the rifle thing, it's like, I've been fitted before, but it's not something that I'm religious about.
Sure.
But it's like, I get fitted for golf clubs. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you get fitted for shoes at some point in your life, right? They put your foot on the little metal measuring thing.
But I love waterfowl hunting more than anything, It's funny, I play at a golf league back in Sacramento, and I basically don't play in the October, November, December tournaments and January because it's waterfowl season. I'm not spending my Saturdays on a golf course. I'm going to be out in the duck blind. But, to your point, it's like, are we doing the work to be most successful, but also, you hit it around the head, to be most ethical too, right? Are we putting as many BBs on to make that most ethical harvest, that most ethical shot, that we're eliminating cripples, we're eliminating sailing birds, like we just want to knock them stone dead right there, let Rocky go, we're looking at Rocky down here who's dead asleep, right? We got Grayson's pup under us here, but put them on the birds, bring them back, and it's a great day. So
totally.
Well, right on. Let's take a peek here. So how about we talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in the shop over the years? Do you have any crazy repair stories, or maybe to kind of put it this way, what's the worst thing that you've seen a customer ever do to a shotgun?
I've got 4 or 5 that are just exceptional stories, but the most recent one, and this one I'm rubbing my temple right now for the listeners, right? This one was truly mind-blowing. So this is about a 2-minute story. So this guy comes in, and he's got this beautiful old Benelli M1 Super 90, and it's a 20 gauge, and I'm a Benelli guy, and so I'm just like, yeah, right. And he calls me, he says, hey, I'm an old man. I got this Benelli 20 gauge. I need to get it fitted for my daughter. I've put a Wolf spring in this gun, or in other guns rather, and I just want to make sure this gun's good to go for my granddaughter. I want to make sure that she has a good experience shooting it. Can we make sure the gun's kind of set to go? I'm like, no problem. This is probably a pretty quick and easy thing. Just come down to the shop, and we'll just get that done for you real quick, right? And he shows up, and the gun is not beat up at all. I'm like, yeah, man, nice. Yeah, let's check it out. And so we pop the gun apart. And I'm looking at the spring, and I'm actually like, oh, this spring's actually pretty strong, but let me make sure that it's serviced back there. So I go to take the back off, and I pop the stock off, and I'm going to pop the nut off the recoil tube, and I notice that it's not budging. And I'm like, okay, not uncommon, a little bit of rust, real seized. So we put some heat on it, and it's still not budging. And I'm like, done this a lot, right? Typically it's not this gnarly. And I put a lot more heat on it to kind of to the edge of where I'm comfortable. And I put my foot on the bench and yank, and it comes undone. And I'm like, wow, this thing is fucking stuck. Well, this was the first clue. I say, hey, man, did you put Loctite on this? This is not something that we normally want to put Loctite on. This is actually a greasable part. He goes, no, I didn't put Loctite on there. I was like, oh, well, there is Loctite on here. So did somebody else do it? He goes, no. I put Loctite somewhere else on the gun. It's like, where'd you put the Loctite? There shouldn't be Loctite anywhere, but why, where else? He said, well, I was at this clay competition, and I brought this gun, and I noticed that this guy next to me, he had this big, giant, fancy Perazzi, and he had his badass sunglasses on and his cool vest with his name on it. And he noticed me continually tightening my choke tube, and he's like, hey, man, put some Loctite on that. And so I did. And I looked at him. I said, "You put Loctite on your choke tube?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah." And I go and I look. And at this point, it dawns on me. He put about what I'm going to estimate to be an entire bottle of red Loctite on his choke tube. And he put so much, it ran all the way down the barrel from the choke tube, all the way through the bolt, through the entire trigger group, welled up at the bottom of the receiver. All of that red Loctite then proceeded to drip down through the recoil tube assembly and pulled up at the very bottom of the bolt, which was the last place it could be caught. And that is where I found it. From there, I then explored the rest of the gun and found Loctite everywhere. His choke tube was stuck.
So I have to ask, that's a crazy story. And it's funny, some of the things we get influenced to do, but I have to ask, because if he's at these competitions, was it a Parazzi or like, do you remember what brand gun? Like, was this a $10,000 gun that he was messing with? Do you remember? Or?
The other guy was shooting a Parazzi. The one that the customer brought in was that Benelli.
Oh,
okay. It was an M1 Super 90, which, the little 20 gauge. But no, it was an impressive one for sure. And I think I might have audibly said out loud, "Oh no!"
Yeah,
I might have said, "Oh no!"
Yeah,
but yeah, no, that was an incredible one. I found a baby bird inside of a Beretta A400 receiver on opening day a couple years ago. Guy brought in a Remington 870. Wouldn't cycle. Every time he pumped it, something weird would happen. He had about 75 cents in loose change inside the action. I've had to beat gas guns apart with mallets and big old hammers many times.
Man,
we've seen a little bit of everything.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's insane. Let me ask you this, and I'm curious because obviously those are kind of those crazy stories. But what is like your most memorable project or build that you've done for a customer? Anything that stands out? Like the positive vibe or
yeah. I honestly, I really, really enjoy the gun I built for John Sandbeck, the Rat Rod, Filthy Spoon guy. That 12 gauge lefty, that gun just came out crazy. My girlfriend did a custom honky tonkin' leather strap for that with the ducks. That one turned out really cool. Yeah, I'm actually doing one for.
I went out to the calling contest, or like he calls it Duck Days, and he had it out there, and that's just a beautiful piece of machinery that you put together. And then obviously the leather strap, it looks
old school,
fantastic.
Yeah. I also really like this one we're doing for Duck Chugger right now. John Story. Yep. He's a cool dude, and we're doing his Beretta A400 Light. It's a 20 gauge. It was all camo. That thing was freaking hammered, and we're just about done with it. We'll still need to do a little more choke work on it, but full Cerakote job. He did the whole thing green, just everything green, and it is such a cool build. Those little 400 lights are such a cool platform. Discontinued for a reason, but when you got one, those are a really unique, cool gun. I really love that one too.
Yeah, shout out Duck Chugger. When I started this Instagram page and this podcast, he was like one of the first guys to follow, and he's been awesome to engage with. I have not actually met him yet, so hopefully one day soon connect with him. But yeah, shout out John.
Talk about his gardening, dude.
Oh, for sure. I follow him on Instagram, and it's an amazing adventure he's got going over there.
What a dude. What a cool dude.
Yeah. So, yeah, these next few questions are pretty quick. I'm just curious, what is your personal favorite duck gun of all time?
I'm just an absolute sub gauge guy. I shoot a 12 gauge sometimes, but very rarely. We're doing a lot of 410 experimentation this year, 20 gauges in general. My favorite of all time is the Benelli M2 20 gauge.
Okay.
There's a lot of very similar guns to that. The new M2 20 gauge, the Franke Affinity 3 in a 20 gauge, the older M1s. There's a handful of Berettas that honestly kind of have similar feel. The A400 Explorer, I really like that gun as well. For whatever reason though, the M2 20 gauge, me and my buddies all have them, and that gun points, feels the balance, how simple they are to maintain, just never a problem. And
I've always been a 12 gauge guy, but I'm looking at it right here, my 20 gauge that I picked up from you today, and
so sweet, man.
Yeah, it's a sweet gun, man, and yeah, I'm actually looking forward to getting that out in the field here very shortly. So
yeah, full custom Rob Roberts build, man.
Yeah, shout out California Waterfowl. I actually got that one at one of their banquets down in Sacramento, and we were talking earlier. I love supporting California Waterfowl, and obviously it works out when we're able to get a beautiful piece of a machinery like that one there, and yeah, it's just a beautiful gun.
Totally, man.
So, I don't want to get you in trouble here, but but
we've already done that.
I am curious. What's the most overrated brand? And like I said, how about this? Maybe the most underrated.
The most overrated and the most underrated. I think.
And let's just keep it factual. Like you see all brands come through here, and you're like, oh, once again, I have brand X coming through, and why am I surprised?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I can't say they're overrated just because they're. I think they're accurately rated for the most part. Overrated is tough.
Sure.
I think people have a pretty good grip on that. But one that still bugs me is we don't have, and I'm just sending out the bat signal to all my industry people, right? Can somebody make a decent 410 automatic, for the love of God? I shoot an 870 lightweight 410 pump. But I mean, the old 1100s. I mean, there's everybody's shooting over and unders right now because there's no auto. That being said, the only auto on the market in a 410 is that TriStar platform, the Mossberg SA410, the Weatherby SA410. They are all the exact same gun marketed by 3 different companies: TriStar, Weatherby, and Mossberg. And those things, chambers are out around, gas is weird. They break locking blocks all the time in other gauges. I see a lot of those that just freaking come apart. Underrated brand though, Fab Arm. I don't know if you've ever handled a Fab Arm, man. So they're very old. Fab Arm is making some super cool stuff. We've had a handful get sold here. One of our employees, Christian, ended up with a 12 gauge 3-inch gun from them. Dude. Impressive. Kind of a Beretta in feel, real deep forend, just wicked smooth. They're fantastic gas systems, nickel-plated internals, really cool.
Is that something they keep on hand here at the shop, or
we should? We don't have any in stock right now. I don't actually know what ordering is like through them right now. But Fab Arm, the other company that I really want to see kind of step up, Fab Arm being made in Italy. The other one out of Italy, kind of the 4th B brand, would be Breda. Breda. They make a handful of really cool kind of Benelli style inertia shotguns as well. And I think competition is healthy, and they're doing a great job.
For sure. I know we talked a little bit about this, but what's one cleaning mistake that just drives you nuts? I mean, obviously we're talking about the Loctite and stuff like that, but what's something where you're like, God, I wish I'll tell the listeners to say, hey, don't do this. What's something that we're doing out there? What's a common mistake?
Don't be afraid to pop your trigger guard out if you're trying to clean your gun. Popping your trigger guard out is so easy. Typically it's 1 or 2 pins. Guys love to swab their barrel out or try to just spray stuff inside the action. Most of the time that's not going to get you very far. Swabbing your barrel out's a great thing, and making sure your action cleans is a great thing, but really your trigger group, your recoil system, and your bolt are the most important stuff. So don't be scared. Don't be afraid. Watch a YouTube video, pony up with a beer or whatever you need, and get down to it. Typically only takes 15 minutes.
For sure. And then here's kind of a fun one. Well, I shouldn't say fun, but what's the best way to ruin your shotgun in 5 seconds? Not that we're trying to, but what's one thing that we should just absolutely avoid doing?
If you pull up and you pull the trigger and you hear something funky, pulling the trigger again will ruin your shotgun pretty quick. Squib loads, like I said, I got a collection of totaled barrels. Barrels are $500 to $1,000, and I just see guys blowing them up all the time, whether they got water in there or mud or a wad from a squib load. I just see it all the time. If you hear something funky, if it doesn't feel right, just stop shooting.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap it up here, man. I really appreciate, obviously your time showing me around the shop here, the work that you've done on, my shotguns. But
you got it, man.
I know I asked you earlier, but maybe you can kind of tell the listeners once again how they can find you. And, I think I asked, are you drop-in only? You can also ship here, so just maybe reach out to you on Instagram. Is that the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, give me a call. 530-966-2321 is the Field and Range Solutions cell phone. You can also call Kittle's and dial the gunsmith line, where we operate out of the back of the Kittle's building here in Colusa at 888 Market Street. Lots to look at in here, so swing by anytime and chit-chat with us. If I'm not here, typically the gun room can still get you taken care of. They can still check your gun in, check your gun out, get you rung up, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, follow us on Instagram, Field and Range Solutions. We should post a lot more. But
you're busy, man.
Yeah, a lot to keep up with. But yeah, Field and Range Solutions on Instagram. Follow Kittle's Outdoor as well on Instagram. And yeah, keep it up on the socials and dropping by and just
like I said, come say hi to Grayson. And one more time, what's your apprentice's name?
Dalton,
come say hi to Dalton.
Come say what up.
Yeah,
the man with the mustache.
I love it. Well, right on, Grayson. Once again, man, thanks for coming on For the Fowlers, and once again for all the listeners, make sure you're following us on Instagram at For the Fowlers, and leave those comments, rate and review us on Spotify, Apple, and once again we're still on YouTube as well. So yeah, appreciate all the support, and we will talk to you next time.